Hello, acolytes! Welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker. Here we talk about all things Dungeons and Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. I am excited for today because, for a couple of reasons, actually. One reason, we get to tackle the fighter, the OG fighter that's taken so long to get to, because, and again, I talked about this in my Better Classes Fighter video, but Fighter is the #1 played class in D&D. Did you guys know that? It's the at least as far as like D&D Beyond says, it's the #1 class that people play. And I personally don't know the reason, actually. Perhaps maybe there's a simplicity to it. Perhaps there is something romantic about playing just the regular fighter. There is something romantic about playing something that does not have magic in a world of magic. There is something romantic about that. But I think a lot of people actually go to the fighter because they think it's the most simple. I would argue that it's not, but it can lean that direction. I will also get in today how I think it should be more complicated, how there are lots of changes that I would make for the flavor, and how that compares to a bunch of other classes with spells, right? So how martial classes kind of measure up with spell casting today, which I'm kind of excited about. So here we have in the chat, we have Azure Shenanigans, capital S on both ends. Was that there last time? You always surprise me, Azure. And then Pedro Longoria, hello. Fighter, I hardly knew her. That's funny. I'm excited for today. So let's get into it. First off, I want to thank all my patrons because they make the lights go on, both in my house and in my head. They help supply the money and the support I need to make this channel the success that it is continuing to be, which I thank all of you for, but also gives me the opportunity to build upon that. And I'm excited for things to come. I don't know if it's going to be this month or the next month, but there's going to be something pretty big that I'm announcing or that I'm doing. Something that will be, I think, a new outlook on certain elements of the game that I don't think has been explored just yet. So stay tuned for that. But let's get into it. So again, thank you, my cleric Scott Burns and my acolytes Kaleidoscope and Weaver Atropos. Thank you so much. If you guys do want to support me in that way as well, I will and want to change a few things to my Patreon this weekend. But you can find all of that in the links below in the description. So Alvaro, hello, just arrived in the chat, as well as Santiago, hello. Oh, you're currently playing a fighter, Alvaro. That's awesome. Then perfect. This is you'll be my hype man in the chat. If you guys do have questions and want to make sure that I see it, lately the chat's been going really fast, which is incredible and awesome. I love that you guys have so many ideas and so much input. But yeah, just put question in all caps before your comment so that I can make sure to see it. So anyways, let's get to it, shall we? Looking at the tier list again, here is what we're looking for today for the fighter. We are looking at either, is it an S, A, B, C, or D on this ranking scale? S being the features are in complete synergy with the class narrative, meaning what you see is what you get, and a key class for reflavoring, including multiple avenues for customization. And then all the way to D, features seldom work with the narrative of the class. They are limiting and leaves little room for reflavoring. So it's kind of the two bookends of this scale that we're looking at. Things we are looking for to decide that are, do the mechanics work with the narrative? Can you separate mechanics from the narrative? Can you easily make changes to the mechanics? Are the abilities unique to the class? How different would two characters with the same subclass be? And does this class give further options for customization? So, what we're doing today here is a couple things, but we're gonna get started on the fighter and what it actually means and what you expect to play as when you pick a fighter. So let's get to it. Here we have in the chat oh, this one's a hard one. DeBarbarock? Is that how you say it? DeBarbarock. Hello. And then Krisha Mejia, hello. Welcome, guys. Okay, so with the fighter, we have a couple things, but let's start with the well-rounded specialist. So fighters learn the basic of all combat styles. This is what is described to you when picking the fighter. Every fighter can swing an axe, fence with a rapier, wield a longsword or greatsword, use a bow, or even trap foes with a net to some degree of skill. Likewise, a fighter is adept with shields and every form of armor. Beyond that basic degree of familiarity, each fighter specializes in a certain style of combat. Some concentrate on archery, some fighting with 2 weapons at once, some on augmenting their martial skill with magic. This combination of broad general ability and extensive specialization makes fighters superior combatants on battlefields and dungeons alike. Now, one piece of flavor here as well is I love fighters that have different kinds of weapons that aren't your regular ones. Even though my current character is a cleric, her weapon of choice is actually an umbrella. It's just a reflavored club, essentially, is what it is. But she can still cast Shillelagh on it and use it in melee combat. But it's an umbrella instead of just a regular weapon. So, bring in wrenches or bats or heck, full-on chairs, right, that you can fight with, and I think it would make a really, really interesting fighter. Okay, going on. Trained for danger. Not every member of City Watch or Village Militia or the Queen's Army is a fighter. Most of these troops are relatively untrained soldiers with the most basic combat knowledge. Veteran soldiers, military officers, trained bodyguards, dedicated knights, and similar figures are fighters. Asterisk here. Depends on your campaign, right? This says that only veteran soldiers, military officers, and trained bodyguards, dedicated knights, etc. are those fighters that have the levels in these classes, right? But I think depending on your campaign, if it's high magic versus low magic, right? Is magic an influence of strength? I wouldn't say strength. I guess you just have to compare it to other things in the campaign, right? What does your level 1 look like? What does your level 20 look like, right? If your relative fighters your relative guardsmen are not fighters, they're just regular common folk, right? And that would probably mean that the level 20 of your characters are godlike, that like how other people say, right? And I think that's how people kind of translate the game, is once you get to level 20, you're killing gods. And gods can sometimes be a lot stronger than that anyways, but if you put your level 1 fighter as all of your guards, if all guards have a level 1 fighter, which to me makes sense because they have been trained in a couple of different martial things, and level 1 fighter really doesn't give you a lot as far as, nothing to me says that what you get as a level 1 fighter is not something you get as a guard. But that's just me. And so if you do that, your level 1 fighter versus your level 20 fighter, in comparison, you're not godlike anymore, right? So at that level 20, it's more common in your world. That's what I'm talking about with high magic, is that level 20s is more common in your world is because everything has shifted a little bit. Does that make sense? Am I making sense right now? And so that's what I prefer in my games. I prefer a higher magic, and so that when we do reach level 20, sure, you might be fighting gods, or you might be fighting the other level 20 politician that's also super, super strong, right? And I think that it's less that level 20 is godlike and more that certain spells are godlike, right? Like Wish or Dream of the Blue Veil. Like those kind of spells that are kind of reality breaking, those are more godlike than like the actual level 20 classes. And so one quick fix if you want your characters to go to level 20 but you don't really want them to travel the planes and kill gods, then just take away those few spells instead of, not allowing your campaign to get that far. So anyways, that was a tangent. I apologize. Going on. Some fighters feel drawn to use their training as adventurers. The dungeon delving, monster slaying, and other dangerous work common among adventurers is second nature for a fighter. not all that different from a life he or she left behind. There are great risks. There are great risks, perhaps, but also great rewards. Few fighters in the city watch have the opportunity to discover a magic flame-tongue sword, for example. Why not? Why not give the guard a flame-tongue sword? Maybe he's a popular guard. Maybe a lot of the guards wish that they had the flame-tongue sword, and maybe he needs some adventurers to protect it, or he himself uses it as a threat to gain higher rank. I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential there that'd be kind of fun. Okay, going on. Christian Meha, I recently reflavored a Psy Warrior as someone that uses a magic thread to move things around. Nice. Instead of his mind like Jolene from JJB8. I don't know what that is, but that's awesome. That's actually really, really cool. A thread to move things around that he pulls on. That's cool. Kind of like how he's like, we're all connected to everything. I had a Psy Warrior Fighter reflavored just as a Air Ganassi. That's it. So instead of like telekinesis, it's just wind powers. That was super fun. That was one of my favorite characters. Santiago, War Veteran Fighter with PTSD. Love it. Radio Whales. Honestly, for flavor, Fighter is my favorite class. It's so versatile. I would agree that it's a blank slate, right? It's very much a blank slate, and we'll actually get into this in a second on like what a fighter, or what we consider a fighter to be in a magical world, but we'll get to that. Hey, Ilya, is that an I or an L? Elijah? I don't know what that is. Elijah draws. Action Surge and Second Wind makes fighter feel sort of like a hemomancy specialist. Interesting, because of self-casting blood magic to increase the performance of self-healing. That I freaking love. I am a slut for some blood-based magic. I am. And here we have a Psy Warrior, but with a permanent spiritual weapon. That is also super cool, guys. Man, you are spitting fire like 10 minutes in. This is awesome. This is fantastic. But speaking of Second Wind, okay. There, like we've talked about before, there is a couple things that make a fighter a fighter. Again, druids have wild shape, sorcerers have meta magic, rogues have sneak attack. What makes a fighter a fighter? And to me, there's a couple things. One is Second Wind, right? Where you have a limited well of stamina that you can draw upon yourself from harm. On your turn, you can use a bonus action to regain hit points equal to 1d10 your fighter level, or plus your fighter level. Once you use this feature, you must finish a short or long rest before you use it again, right? So fighters, to me, are a representation of endurance. They are a representation of athletics, a representation of skill in melee combat with weapons. And so the question that we'll have today, obviously, is does the abilities fit the narrative, right? And here it does. Here it does. We have an option where they can steal within themselves extra stamina to increase their health. And you could argue in D&D that stamina and health are the same thing, right? Stamina and health are the same thing. Once those two things run out, or that one thing runs out, then you're dead, or you have no energy to move on. And you could flavor hitting 0 hit points as either one. 1, you're knocked unconscious because you've been hit too many times, or 2, you're just too tired to go on, right? But second one is Action Surge. So you can push yourself beyond your normal limits for a moment. On your turn, you can take one additional action, an extra action. So you are a burst of speed or adrenaline or stamina in a single moment. Once you use this feature, you must finish a short or long rest before you can use it again. Starting at 17th level, you can use it twice before a rest, but only once on the same turn. There's a good clarification there. So this is it. This is the thing that you can do for a fighter. Now, with other classes, we've talked about in other videos how the one thing that makes a class is good when it's customizable. It's good when there's other things that you can do with it. It adds flavor if it adds upon the class in more ways than one, right? I.e. the wild shape, you can do a lot of things with that. I.e. the meta magic, you can choose different things to make your character different, right? But here, although they're very flavorful for the class and it kind of pursues the narrative, it doesn't give you any other thing to do with that. It's that and that's it. There isn't even really a pool of resource that you can make other things do or pull from that pool, right? We talked about the rage feature last week, right? The rage feature has a pool of a number of different times that you can use rage, and we talked about using something else to pull or use a slot from that rage. And I'm actually working on a subclass right now that will actually be released next week or next month for my patrons, which I am extremely happy with. That you can use different things for the rage. But with Fighter, you don't have that, right? There are other ways to customize the Fighter, however. And that's in their feats. Because the Fighter has more ability score improvements than anybody else, than any other class. So the ability score improvements, you can do one of two things, right? You can increase the You can increase 2 ability scores by +1, or you can take a feat, right? And so if we count them here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 different occasions that you can choose feats to customize and add to your character. Now, if we go to like the Sorcerer, let's say. Let's go to the Sorcerer. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I feel like I'm the Count from Sesame Street. They have 5. They have 5 ability score improvements. So only 5 situations where they can use a feat to customize. And you're like, oh, it's only 2. That's not that much. But it's the only one that does that. And 2 feats can do a lot. And you might say as well, that's just a spellcaster. Well, let's go to the Barbarian. The one that we covered last week, and probably arguably the most akin to the Fighter. Again, we have 1 at level 4, then 2, level 8, 3 at level 12, 4 at level 16, and 5 at level 19. So still 5. So the Fighter gets the opportunity to get more features over time, right? Which is also really, really cool. Now, there's a couple things that I'm kind of going to talk about a lot in this moment, because there is a lot of things that I wish could be done with the Fighter that they did do. They did do, but only in a subclass. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. the Battlemaster. So here is a customizability that I believe, if I remember right, was going to be a part of the regular Fighter class, not a subclass. It was going to be a part of the base class. However, for some reason, during the process of making the Fighter in the player's handbook, they instead let's not put in this base class. Let's just put in a subclass. And here we have the Battlemaster Fighter. And if you don't know what I'm talking about combat superiority, which is at archetype level 3rd level, you learn maneuvers that are fueled by special dice called Superiority Dice. And so you have the 3 maneuvers of your choice at the start, and you can choose a bunch of maneuvers that do different things, right? Expending Superiority Dice as you do so. And then it gives you a saving throw if you ever need it. So some of these maneuvers are like ambush. When you make a dexterity check or initiative roll, you can expend 1 superiority dice to add the die to the roll, provided you aren't incapacitated. Sorry, on initiative roll. And so you can have a bonus in your fighting style to give you an advantage at the beginning of the fight. Bait and switch. If you're within 5 feet of the creature, you can expend 1 superiority dice. Why is that word so hard for me? And switch places with the creature. That's super handy when you have a wizard in the face of another creature that you don't want to hit it because he's concentrating on a spell or whatever. You can come in and switch yourself with a character with another character, which I think is really not done with any other class or feature. So things like brace. When you see when a creature you see moves within reach, you have with a melee weapon you're holding, you can use your reaction to expend a superiority dice and make 1 attack against the creature using that weapon. Let's see, evasive footwork. You can spend you can spend a die, rolling the die and adding the number to your AC until you stop moving. So, anyways, you see what I mean. There is a lot. You can check them out. There are a ton of these things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 23 different features. which is a lot of customizability for a fighter class or fighter subclass. And so you can see like why these are just fighter moves, right? When you think of a fighter, these are all things that possibly what it was talking about up here. Let's go back up here. When he's talking about veteran soldiers, military officers, and trained bodyguards, dedicated knights, or similar figures or fighters, they should be able to do these things, right? They should be able to do all of these things, but they can't. You need to be a Battlemaster Fighter in order to do so. And so what I think they should have done was obviously put these in the base class, and I think a lot of people do that, or a lot of people agree with me. And what I personally do is, if someone plays a fighter in my games, I will basically give them a feat for free. In Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, they did come out with Martial Adept. So this one gives martial training that allows you to perform special combat maneuvers of the Battlemaster archetype, right? And so you can basically, if you're basically any class, but especially if you're a fighter that doesn't choose the Battlemaster archetype, you can still get Battlemaster moves. So in a way, I think WotC was like, yeah, we realized that we probably should have given other Battlemaster moves to other things, and so here you go, kind of thing, which I think is interesting, which I think is good. And you can use like all 7 of your feats on just that. You can just get a bunch of Battlemaster features and just use that as you level up in a different class. I think it would be interesting. Oh, you guys are getting ahead of me. Okay. It says Christian. Oh, hey, Christian. In power, yes, but in other campaigns, you'll want to differ from fighting demigods all the time. Yeah. I would agree. Again, it depends on a campaign does not have to be fighting gods at the level 20 to be legit or to be fun. It doesn't. I think it is fun. I think it's completely fun, but it doesn't have to be. Radio Wells, Battlemaster should have been a martial feature. And how casters have spells, just a hot take. Here's the thing. It's a hot take, but like everyone has it. And hey, maybe 2024, it's a big wish list of mine that they retake that Battlemaster and just kind of flush it back into the class. But do I think it'll happen? Nah. Fighter is easy in S tier. It's looking. We'll see. All the features not only explain what the feature does, not how. That's true. Action surge can be Hemocraft or anime power of friendship or magical aid. Absolutely. And they now have a fighting style where you can pick some maneuvers. Oh, yeah. Yes, they do. Thank you for pointing that out. I almost forgot about that. In the fighter itself, they do have another fix. Where was it? It was back at the top. They have another fix also introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything with optional class features. So as a fighting style option, you can use a superior technique and then choose one available Battlemaster archetype, right? And so with that superiority die, you get a D6. I think is different. Is that different? Hold on. Battlemaster. They have a D8. They have a D8. Well, why'd they do that? That's confusing. Why did they do that? They think one maneuver was too strong? You know, I will never understand some decisions, but I respect the decisions if they think it is egregious. I really hope I use that word right. Okay, yeah. So you originally have fighting styles like archery, +2 to bonus attack rolls, ranged weapons, defense. You can choose this one while you're wearing armor, +1 to bonus AC. And these are extra customizable options for fighting style or melee fighters. So monk has it. Whoa, do barbarians have it? Barbarians don't have it. So is it just the fighter and the monk? Yeah, I think it is. So you have the fighting style. Again, great customizability on depending on what you're going for as a fighter. You have great weapon fighting as well as protection. That's also included really recently. 2-weapon fighting, and then all of those that was added recently. So blind fighting, blindside a range of 10, interception with ranged attacks. You can intercept it, and then Wait, is it just ranged attacks? Whenever you can see a creature hits a target other than you within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to reduce the damage. Okay, so it's whatever, either melee or ranged, and then the superior technique. So this is how it currently stands, and how I think it would be an easy fix would just to be kind of assimilate all of those things to a fighter, into the fighter class, all the Battlemaster archetypes or maneuvers, right? So what I think that would benefit the D&D as a whole, here is a hot take. I think that fighters, or not just fighters, but melee combatants in D&D should have a whole spell casting system. Right? Except it's not spells. It's just the same exact system, but just for fighters, right? So just like and this here I'm going to explain myself. With spellcasters, they have different kinds of spells at different levels of complexity. That's either ranged or touch or used on themselves in order to induce an effect, right? Now, fighters can do the exact same thing. They can use ranged attacks. They can use melee attacks. We've already been shown, just like in the second wind, that they can imbue an effect within themselves with their own will and prowess and skill. And so why not make a whole fleshed out system that would do a similar kind of customizability and pick and choose list that spellcasters have, right? And I think this would fix a lot. One, because I think a lot of people do recognize the disparity between like a melee. The melee side of D&D and the spellcasting side of D&D, where spellcasting sides can tend to be on the stronger side in comparison, right? It is the spellcasters who are going to be the god-killing ones in a very very real sense, or the things that are going to break reality. A fighter level 20 is never going to break your reality, never is. They're going to do massive damage on a god when they hit it, if they can, but they're never going to break reality with the things that they can do, right? And so I think another whole fleshed out system would be a really beneficial thing for this side of D&D. And I would love to see it. I think that's so cool. And here and then we can talk about like half casters. This would honestly bring so many cool things to half casters, because one, they can choose either one, right? They can choose whether they have maybe some spells and then maybe a bunch of different melee things if they wanted to focus on that. Or maybe a few melee things and then a bunch of spell casting. Or they can pick and choose kind of like in the middle, where they can do half and half, where they can get a bunch of melee stuff and a bunch of spell casting, kind of like meet in the middle. And obviously I think it would be easier to balance too in my head, and again, I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here, but I think might be easier to balance, because instead of looking at a spellcasting stuff and then melee stuff, it's just two different spellcasting systems where they could just be looked at the same, right? So a level 1 spell would be equal in power to a level 1 maneuver. Let's just call them maneuvers instead of spells, right? And so this half-caster can choose, do you want a level 1 spell or do you want a level 1 maneuver? Right? I think that would be really, really cool. So open world, I think martial classes like fighters and monks should have stances. You could also call them stances, right? I think stances might be the self-effect. The self-effect is them imbuing themselves with the abilities, kind of like we talked about. Open world addict, is that how they do it? So you maybe run into a problem with not being very adaptive. Say you prepare a defensive sense and the enemy doesn't attack, your turn gets wasted. Yeah, it might need to be, and that could be a disparity, right? If something is really strong, you could get wasted. But hey, a lot of spells get wasted. A lot of things have legendary resistances. There is some things that spellcasters aren't the best at. Great example of martial versus caster for concepts is Moshoku Tensei. I don't know who that is. Every stance could be a positive and negatives. An aggressive stance dishes out more damage, makes you vulnerable to attack. Defensive stance allows you to resist some damage, and then you can get a penalty to an attack. Yeah, maybe that's something like a rage could do. Like if you're raging, you could elongate your maneuvers when you take a stance because you're like situated in that emotion or that power or that stance. That would be a really, really cool mechanic for the Barbarian. Yeah, Azure says rage is like a Barbarian stance. Yeah, it very much is. Defensive stance is just a dodge action. and like I said, this is what we're talking about, right? There's already elements in the game that kind of explain the features in a different way. But what if we just take those things and explain them in like a more melee, more in a structure more akin to spellcasting? Right. I mean, if you think that is not something that the game would benefit from, I would love to know your just like how you might look at that. But to me, that makes complete sense. Because we already have something that works really great and people love customizability, especially so, and I think it would make like fighter classes more popular. My personal thing is I personally can't do fighters or melee things in campaigns because I don't have like a lot of continuous customization like I do, say, the cleric, right? And maybe that's just my attention span showing. But they usually aren't my go-to classes. I will hands down play a fighter in a one-shot, and I've loved it. I have a one-shot coming up that I'm playing a rogue. So I love them in one-shots. I love the flavor that they present, and I love the things that it comes up, or with the flavor that you can do with them. Because there are some things that you can do with melee classes that you can't do with spellcasters, right? Radio Wells, I think you don't even need to make this so complex that it rivals Pathfinder 2. I'm unfamiliar with Pathfinder 2, but I think it uncomplicates things a little bit too because it's two systems of the same thing. So really, you only have to learn one system applied two different ways. Where instead we have the system of spellcasters that you play differently with them, and then you have the fighters that are playing completely different from that. Right? So there's two ways of thinking. When you play a fighter, when you play a spellcaster, it takes two different kinds of mentalities. Where if you have two of the same systems, it's easier and simpler because you already know one because you've played the other. It's just a different application of that same structure. Yeah, that makes sense. Christian, I mean, it comes down to DM and aid to the melee characters with the bonus features and items that give them that push so they stay powerful. It's extra work, but work that's worth it. Yeah. And I think that is a lot of what Wizards of the Coast expects you to do as well, right? With the fighters, you give them more magical items so that they are overcompensated with the things that they can do, right? And I think that's super cool. Hold on, I'll just switch to chatting. There is, with the DM, there's a certain element of expectation to do that for your melee things as well. But with magical items, there are things for fighters just as much as there are things for spellcasters, right? And spellcasters, if you're playing a spellcaster, or if I'm playing a spellcaster, I want magic items just as bad as the fighter does. And if the fighter's getting a bunch of magic items and I'm getting none, I'm going to feel left out a little bit, right? And so I think that if we do that still, we can give both of them different magical items and not worry about giving one to like overcompensating one over the other, right? And then that's even less work for us as the DMs to do. So I don't know. As I'm talking to you guys, I'm convincing myself more and more that this should be a thing. But I'm really enjoying your guys' input on this because again, these are things that I haven't thought of before. As you said, maybe just add more action types for full marshals and half casters. More action types. What do you mean by that? Pedro, how about a stance that focuses on countering and softening the target when you take damage? Lowers opponent's AC. Yep. Mage Hunter that gains resistance over magic. That would be great. Barbs should have their rage become stronger as they level up. That would be a fun thing for them as well. That would be. I would agree with that. That would be interesting. And you could make like a rage-focused Barbarian subclass, right? That just focuses on their rage, right? You have the Moon Druid that just focuses on their wild shape ability. Yeah, that would be really cool. DP, what are we talking about? We are talking about a system for the fighter akin to spellcasting. So a structure that you have on a leveled feature, leveled maneuvers, just like the spellcasting features work for spellcasters. You have a similar amount of leveled abilities and customization for the fighter, essentially. And what that kind of looks like if you have just the same application, just or the same structure applied in two different subsets of D&D. So yeah, I love all of these ideas. I love all these ideas. So another thing as well that I do want to talk about is well, hold on. So we do have speaking of spellcasters. Okay. So speaking of spellcasting in fighting. There is an expectation that as you are a fighter, you're not really using any magic. Baseline. There are magical fighters like the Rune Knight, which is an awesome subclass. You imbue the magic of giants into yourself to grow in size, right? And to invoke runes for power. You have the Eldritch Knight, which is the basically the half caster, or the quarter caster, wizard knight, essentially. And then you have, is that the only one? Kind of the Psi Warrior that has more of a psionic kind of magic. So we have a lot of different warriors here. So a lot of different kinds of gishes that we see through the fighter. But one thing as well that I think is another really, really cool application for this stances that we are talking about, maneuvers, this system, is the Arcane Archer, right? And we're talking about long-ranged attacks where we can maybe imbue more things into our weapons. And they have arcane shots like Magic Arrow. We can dissolve this into those maneuvers as well, into this spellcasting or this cast maneuver feature. So this one says, whenever you fire a non-magical arrow from a short bow or long bow, you can make it magical for the purposes of overcoming resistances and immunity to non-magical attacks and damage. Magic fades from the arrow immediately after it hits or misses a target. Curving shot, you learn how to direct an errant arrow toward a new target. You can make an attack roll with a magic arrow and you miss. You can use a bonus action to reroll the attack roll against a different target within 60 feet of the original target. Ever ready shot. Your magical archery is available whenever a battle starts. If you roll initiative and have no uses of your arcane shot, missing, you regain one use of it. Oh, sorry. Those are just the features. The actual shots are here. You have Banishing Arrow, which does what you think it does. Beguiling Arrow takes an extra 2d6 psychic damage, and then choose one of your allies within 30 feet. One of your allies? The target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw. It is charmed by the chosen ally. Okay, interesting. And then, yeah, so there's a bunch of different things that you can do here as well for ranged attacks, right? And a lot of people think that this one is not a great subclass anyways, and if you wanted to be a magical archer, just be a ranger, or just another fighter, right? Or people actually say, just be a Battlemaster Fighter and have your maneuvers be more talking about the ranged attacks, and you have a better subclass in this one, which is another reason why we should just dissolve it. So, oh yeah, and Gunslinger. Yeah, Gunslinger might be a good, better option for Arcane Archer as well. I'm not personally a fan of the Gunslinger. It's probably my least favorite subclass or class from Matthew Mercer. I am a fan of all of his work, but not really the Gunslinger. It's not my cup of tea. And then Nicolay says, one cool thing you see in Baldur's Gate 3 is weapon properties. That could be a way to fix warriors as a whole and give rogues characters who don't focus their weapons and more things to do. Yes. So here's the thing is this, and this is another argument for this, is where is the customizability power? Who has power over the customizability of your character, right? Is it the DM or is it you? Do you want power, or do you want the DM to have that power? If you want the DM to have the power, awesome, right? It's kind of as is then, right? Right now is the best option, because then they give you different kinds of features, different kinds of options with different kinds of magical items to give you bonus features to help you. And so if we change that and made it more into your power, and that most of your abilities come from what you can do yourself instead of the magical items, and then of course the magical items will just be on top of that, just as they are the spellcasters, then the power comes back to the player for customizability. And the question is, where do you want that power? Do you want that power with the player, or do you want that power with the DM, or do you want it in between? I think this is a huge level of game design too, is where is that power, and where do you want that power? To me personally, I want as much power as I can in the players. That's me, right? I want them to be a part of the process. I want their character to be their character, because hey, I got the rest of the world to take care of, guys. I got the rest of the world to make my own. I don't need to keep track of your character, try to figure out what you need, what you want, where your character's going. I don't need that. And I'm probably going to do it injustice anyways. And so I want you to decide what your character can do, and you have power over that, right? Now, one thing I won't do is have my players choose the magical items that they find, right? Because I think that that's kind of unimmersive. But I will pay attention to like what they want, and as the game currently stands, I will provide those things, or I will try to provide things that invoke or promote that narrative that they're trying to accomplish. But I want that power in the player. I even put that player power a lot in the player for my world building, right? Sometimes they should know that at any point they can really say, like, hey, I know this person in my backstory. Like if they're in their town, right? And I have flushed out some NPCs, but I haven't flushed out anyone. I can have a we're good on time. I could have a NPC that's the owner of a magic shop in the town that they're from, and have that flushed out. But they can then come in and say like, oh yeah, I'm friends with the magic owner shop guy in town. This is his name and this is what he does. And that could be completely different from what I prepared. But I love that they're trying to involve themselves in the world. And of course, if that doesn't make sense, I'll say, no, you don't. Like you never went over there, or you never had reasons to, and things like that. I can veto it. But I love that when they make initiative like that, that I can then play with it and say like, absolutely, you know this person, and why don't you tell the others a little bit more about them? And then I can play with that, and then all of a sudden it becomes something that we create, right? D&D is a collaborative game, and so I want to be as collaborative as I can whenever I can. So, anyways, that was another tangent. There's a lot of good tangents today, so a lot of good ideas. And so, with all of these, is there anything missing? Is there anything missing with the fighter as far as subclasses go, right? And the thing is like, I personally don't think that there is anything missing with the fighter as it currently stands. I really don't think so. But just as the fighter. When you start implementing other things, the really only thing that's missing could be like other elements of magicalness, right? Like a cosmic fighter, or a fighter that channels electricity, or a fighter that is can transform into other beasts, or can manipulate his blade in different kinds of ways. It becomes more of a magical element, and then you start to turn into more like Gish-like characters, where you're not really the fighter character, where the whole purpose of your class is to not be magical, right? And so, which is another reason why, one, I think that these maneuvers should be a thing, right? So that we can continue to grow on the fighter without it becoming magical. To keep it a almost, what's the word? Original? No. Keep it clean? You guys, I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense here. But to protect its originality and its archetype. And I think that even with those things, you would be able to flavor it in so many fun and interesting ways. If we, but if we don't do that, obviously other subclasses are fine. But that's kind of how I see it. And again, these are base thoughts that I'm having today. They can be much more fleshed out later. But I'm really enjoying this kind of conversation with the fighter. And again, because they are a clean slate, because they are so basic in a good way, that I hit the mic. That they have a lot of potential to grow, not only in flavor but also in mechanics, as you pursue those kind of things. So, anyways, if Arcane Archer worked on all range attacks, it would be so much cooler. I would agree. Yeah, but some extra damage relentless. Oh, you guys are talking about range again. Yeah. Elementalist Fighter is another one. Yes, Elementalist Fighter. There really isn't an Elementalist Fighter, is there? So that is something that would be missing. But again, like, it's magical, right? And if you would argue that, like, the Elemental Fighter is the Ranger, right? Is the Ranger, because it has elemental magic. So it would be difficult to do that. So where does it fit on the grand scheme of things? Where does the fighter fit on the tier scale? Let's look at it. Well, first of all, hold on, just real quick. We got time. We got time. But be thinking about it while I'm doing this. And if you have opinions in the chat, go ahead and put them now. Where you guys think the fighter lands? But looking real quick at the rest of the stuff that the fighter has, we have extra attack, which again you can attack twice instead of once in a single turn, which is awesome. The Barbarian gets that. Hold on. Now I'm drawing a blank. Does the monk have that? Melee fighters have that. Indomitable, you can reroll saving throws that you fail. If you do, you can reuse the new roll, and you can't use this feature until you finish the long rest. And then it featured twice at level 13 and 3 times at level 17. And then you have extra attack. Level 11, you can attack 3 times instead of 2 in one turn. And then level 20, you can attack 4 times in a single turn. And so there's a certain quickness and viability. And here's one thing that I do want to touch on too, is extra attack. A lot of people think like extra attack is like, oh, you're just quicker. You're just quicker in a single turn, so you get like more fighting and more like attacks in. And that's not necessarily true. To me, when you hit an attack, in a turn there's a 6-second time span, right? In a turn there's a 6-second time span. And in that time, I can make a lot of swings in a 6-second time span, right? And so what the attack is during that 6-second time span, you're able to open up your opponent's defenses in a single moment, right? So during that 6 seconds, you're able to parry one away and take a slash and possibly hit this creature. You're able to disable their defenses for a split second and hit the creature. Whether you found a nick in their armor and you take a swing at it, or you maneuver yourself in a position where they swing and you miss, opening them up for swinging from the back, that kind of thing. And so it's during that 6 seconds you have an opportunity to swing at an opening in your enemy. When you're attacking 4 times in a single time or a single turn, in that 6 seconds you're such a skilled fighter that you're able to open up your opponent's defenses 4 times within those 6 seconds. And within those 6 seconds, you're able to try to take advantage of those openings 4 separate times, right? And so that makes a lot more sense to me, right? You can also flavor it as time. You can flavor it as like you're speeding time up really, really quick so you have more attacks, you being like some sort of time fighter. Or you can do it more like the monk, where it's like a flurry of blows, right? Where you are just attacking really, really fast. Whoop, I'm getting excited. I'm hitting the mic. But to me, that's kind of what an extra attack is, and what that flavor is. Because again, it's you have to think about what is happening in those 6 seconds and how you can really flavor those fighting. And while you have those 6 seconds, go crazy. Go crazy. What are you doing? What do you like? Flavor it up. Are you spinning? Are you flipping? Are you somersaulting? Are you maneuvering behind, in front? Are you parrying your opponent's weapon? There's a lot of fun things that you can do with that. Tons. Another problem with Fighter is that a fighter doesn't get a lot of higher levels, so it is so attempting to multi-class into other classes after level 11. Yeah, it doesn't get those extra attacks until later. And that's really all it gets on the second half of their attacks, or the second half of their class. And so there's not a lot of flavor here, just attacking more times. So I could definitely see the attractiveness of multi-classing there. Yeah. But extra attacks, they're powerful, and it's very evocative, and it's very tempting still. I love the idea of just breaking the space-time continuum, just striking 3 times at once. Yeah, yeah, I think it's great. Fighter attacks maybe like a video game stun lock. Yeah, ooh, that'd be an interesting way. So with an extra attack, your first one is like a stun lock, and you have more openings that way. That would be interesting. I realized that, yeah. So what we're talking about, the extra attacks level 11, level 20, right there. So, with all of these things, I love the fighter. I love the fighter. There's so much to do it. There are some things that I wish could be done elsewhere, but there is certain elements that are still there. It's an interesting perspective, because it's not like I want more or less out of the fighter. It's just that I think that things should be situated differently. Isn't that weird? So I just think that some things should be over here, while other things should be over here, and maybe if we want to, we can build upon that as well. Because I think that if we do kind of bring that back, and just one more thing about this spellcasting thing, if we take that and if we take the structure of spellcasting, put it into maneuvers, then there's a lot more homebrewing that could be done for maneuvers, right? There's a tons of spellcasting homebrewing that is done, new spells that you can do for different things. I think it would be so fun to see the creativity in a community for the fighter, and seeing what all things that can be done there. See what kind of influences that we can bring in. Tons of fighting styles. You have everything from boxing and fencing and different styles that you can do in Western culture, and you also have tons of things that you can do in the Eastern culture with just a variety of different martial arts, right? Karate, Kenpo, Taekwondo, Capoeira, things like that, where you can just take elements of theirs that make them different and put them into where this would be on like a power level scale over here. And it would just be so cool. And where you would originally maybe have to make an entire subclass on one of these fighting styles, instead you can make a fighter that is that could be maybe magical in a similar way, and then also still have those fighting styles that you can choose from. It's more ability to mix and match and create something unique, and also have all the inspiration from different elements of the world. So I would say that if we talked about just flavor alone, if we looked at the tier list, features are in complete synergy with the class narrative. I think it comes close. I think it comes really, really close. I think there is, again, the disparity between Battlemaster. If I'm playing a Battlemaster, S for sure. If I'm playing a Battlemaster, S for sure. But if I'm just playing a fighter, I cannot give it an S. I'm sorry. A, strong features that promote creativity with the right brainstorming. A lot is possible. I think as a fighter, A is strong. B offers decent reflavoring options and provides good narrative, although for specific instances. I don't think it's that specific, so I would give a fighter an A. I personally would. Does the mechanics work with the narrative? Yes, they do. Can you separate mechanics from the narrative? In some ways, absolutely. Can you easily make changes to the mechanics? Yeah, yes you can. And if you wanted, again, to give the Battlemaster maneuvers to any other of the fighters, you can do that pretty easily. Are the abilities unique to the class? Very much so. How different would two characters of the same subclass be? Unfortunately, more same than other classes, unless you're a Battlemaster. Does the class give further options for customization? And this is where it's really kind of a hard no. It doesn't. So A, lower A, but definitely an A. So, but this was fun, guys. This was fun. This was probably one of my favorite explorations. And so, going from the fighter, we do have the blood hunter that we can look at with the flavor deep dives. But that's essentially it. And so what I'll be kind of looking at this next week is what I can do in the future for these kind of flavor explorations. So if you do have ideas of different ways that we can, or different things that we can do in these live streams, let me know. I'm open to ideas. But I have loved these explorations a lot, and I'm glad that a lot of you have as well. So just be thinking about that as I think about that. And next week we'll probably look at the Blood Hunter to see what kind of flavor potential it has, because I know a lot of you have asked for that. But in the meantime, like, subscribe if you haven't already, and what will happen after the video is, again, it will do this weird, if you weren't here last time, YouTube has done this unique thing where it has basically raids like Twitch, but you can also push it over to premieres. So I'll just be pushing you guys over to the premiere for tomorrow. Last week there was a lot of hype. There wasn't a lot of likes. There wasn't a lot of views on the Swarm Keeper deep dive that I did, or the Swarm Keeper flavor video that I did, but a lot of people commented and say that you loved it. So I wanted to do it justice and make another one this week with the Hexblade, and maybe it being a little bit more popular subclass, that maybe people like it a little bit more. So it'll take you to that, and so go over there and prepare for tomorrow. Just kind of mark it in as a reminder. I think it'd be kind of fun. So anyways, in the meantime, go out there and spread the good word of D&D and make the world a better place, both on and off your tables. See you in the next one.